What if the quiet hum of your daily life hid a secret so dark, so vast, it could rewrite history? It sounds head-spinning, right? This isn't just an old book. This is a ghost. A whisper from a time when the world was tearing itself apart and the very fabric of civilization hung by a thread. A time when shadows stretched from Berlin across continents, reaching for things of unimaginable power and impossible value. What you're looking at isn't simply history, it's a blueprint. A roadmap to a legacy the world thought was buried forever. Now, imagine this. Imagine this journal and the cryptic symbols within its pages finding their way into the hands of someone living right now. Someone dangerous, someone who understood its true purpose. And then imagine that person right next door. Or worse, living under the same roof. That's what Sarah discovered. Sarah, an American nanny half a world away just trying to make ends meet. She stumbled into something that should only exist in history books, something that could shatter everything we know about the endgame of the Third Reich. It started small, a fleeting glance, a hushed conversation, a feeling that prickled at the back of her neck. But it ended with her, an unassuming woman, staring down the barrel of a historical nightmare. Because her employer's business partner wasn't just a wealthy eccentric, he was a collector, and what he collected weren't trinkets. They were secrets. Secrets that could plunge us back into the deepest shadows. But before we dive deeper, if you found yourself captivated by the intricate web of espionage and the quiet bravery of an unexpected hero, also if you love your mom, then subscribe, like, and comment. If you ever noticed a weird person, it means a lot to us. We appreciate your support. Sarah had always prided herself on her attention to detail. It was part of what made her so good at her job. Nannying wasn't just about playtime and snacks. It was about creating a secure, organized world for the children she cared for. For the past 6 months, that world had been the opulent, sprawling home of the Harrington family, architect Julian and his wife Clara, a busy art consultant. 2 energetic kids, a bustling schedule, and a paycheck that made living in the city possible. It was a good gig, a normal gig. Until it wasn't. The first crack in that normalcy wasn't a bang or even a whisper. It was a smell, a faint, almost imperceptible scent that clung to the air in the seldom-used guest room on the 3rd floor. Sarah was tidying up, a routine task, preparing for the arrival of Julian's business partner who was flying in from Europe, Mr. Silas. That's what Julian had called him. A very important, very private man, he'd said, with an air of reverence that struck Sarah as a little odd. Julian was usually so laid back, so American. This deference felt European, or more precisely, old-world European. The scent in the guest room was like old paper, dried leather, and something else, something metallic and sharp like ancient rust, or perhaps a trace of cleaning solvent meant for very specific materials. It was subtle, almost a phantom. She brushed it off. Maybe it was the dust accumulating in a room rarely opened. Or maybe it was just her imagination, overworked from a long week of toddler tantrums and school runs. But then there were the objects. Julian had been particular about how the guest room should be set up. Minimalist, he'd insisted. Mr. Silas appreciates simplicity. Yet, a few days before Silas's arrival, Sarah noticed a large, sturdy travel trunk sitting by the window. Not a modern Samsonite, but an old, dark wooden trunk, bound with heavy leather straps and brass clasps that had seen better centuries. It looked like something out of a period drama, not a modern business trip. It was locked, of course, and heavy. She tried to move it to vacuum, but it barely budged. "Just leave it, Sarah," Clara had said, walking by with a stack of art catalogs. "Julian handled Mr. Silas's luggage. He has specific needs." Clara had smiled, but her eyes held a hint of something Sarah couldn't quite place, a little nervousness, or just the stress of hosting an important guest. Sarah had shrugged internally. Rich people had their quirks. Maybe Mr. Silas had a collection of antique hats, or perhaps a rare stamp album that needed its own fortress. He focused back on the kids, on dinner, on the endless cycle of daily life. The trunk, the smell, they were just background noise. Little blips on the radar of her ordinary day. But the blips started to merge. Silas arrived late one evening, a shadowy figure emerging from a black car. Sarah only caught a glimpse. Tall, thin, dressed in expensive, dark clothes that seemed almost too formal for an informal business dinner. His hair was slicked back, his face sharp, almost hawkish. He didn't smile. Julian and Clara greeted him with hushed tones, guiding him quickly upstairs. The kids were asleep, thankfully, spared the unsettling energy that now permeated the house. Over the next few days, Silas became a ghost in the machine of the Harrington household. He rarely ate with the family, preferring to take his meals in his room. He spent long hours in Julian's study, a room that was usually a creative open space, now tightly shut, a low murmur of voices sometimes escaping through the thick oak door. Sarah would pass the study, hear the low rumble of Silas's voice, accented and unfamiliar, and Julian's more deferential replies. She never heard laughter, never heard casual chatter. It was always intense, focused, almost ritualistic. One afternoon, the kids were at a playdate, leaving Sarah with an unusual stretch of quiet time. She decided to tackle the overflow of laundry. As she went to retrieve a forgotten pillowcase from the guest room, she heard it. A faint, rhythmic scratching sound coming from inside the locked antique trunk. Like fingernails on wood or perhaps something else. It was unnerving. She froze, listening, heart thumping. The sound lasted only a few seconds, then stopped abruptly. Silence. She told herself it was just the house settling. Old houses made noises. Old trunks made noises, but her logical brain argued back. Locked trunks don't usually make rhythmic scratching sounds. She tried the handle, locked as expected. She put her ear to the cool wood, feeling foolish but compelled. Nothing. Just the faint echo of her own heartbeat. She peered around the room. Everything was immaculate, precisely placed. Too precise, perhaps. It felt less like a guest room and more like a temporary vault. It was then she noticed something else. On the nightstand, almost hidden by a stack of foreign newspapers, German she thought, though she couldn't read them, was a small, ornate silver box. It wasn't Julian's style. It wasn't Clara's. It was old, intricate, with a strange, almost Gothic design etched into its lid. Out of pure, unadulterated curiosity, she reached for it. Just as her fingers brushed the cool metal, the door behind her clicked open. She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Julian stood there, not angry, but with an odd, almost unreadable expression on his face. His eyes flickered from her hand to the silver box, then back to her. "Sarah," he said, his voice unusually strained. "What are you doing?" The air in the room suddenly felt heavy, charged. It was a simple question, but the way he asked it, the way his gaze lingered on the box, made her feel like she'd been caught with her hand in a cookie jar. Except the cookie jar was ancient, dangerous, and held something far more valuable than sweets. "Just checking for dust," she stammered, pulling her hand back quickly. "Heard a strange noise, thought maybe something fell." Julian nodded slowly, but his eyes were still on the silver box. He walked over, picked it up, and placed it inside the antique trunk, which he then locked with a key he pulled from his pocket. He didn't say another word, just gave her a polite but firm nod, indicating her dismissal. The incident with Julian and the silver box gnawed at Sarah. It was a persistent itch, a discordant note in the otherwise perfect symphony of her nannying life. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled upon a boundary, a line she wasn't supposed to cross. And the more she thought about it, the more she realized that boundaries existed for a reason, usually to protect something, or to hide something. That night, after the children were tucked in and the house settled into its usual expensive silence, Sarah found herself in the Harringtons' vast, tastefully curated library. Julian and Clara were out attending some art gallery opening. This was her time, her chance. She pulled up her laptop, her heart doing a nervous drumbeat against her ribs. What was she even looking for? "Old silver box, Gothic design," she typed, feeling ridiculous. The internet, ever eager to please, flooded her with images of Victorian jewelry boxes, medieval reliquaries, and endless fantasy trinkets. Nothing matched the specific, unsettling aura of the box she'd seen. She thought about the newspapers, German, and the accent of Mr. Silas, German, Austrian, Eastern European, certainly. "Antique travel trunk," she typed next. Again, a deluge of images. But then one particular image caught her eye. It wasn't the trunk itself, but a symbol etched into the brass clasp of a similar-looking trunk in the image, a stylized eagle, and below it a distinct interlocking geometric pattern, a swastika. The blood drained from Sarah's face. She scrolled quickly, her breath catching. No, that wasn't right. That was too extreme. The images connected to the swastika were all Nazi memorabilia, horrifying, chilling artifacts of a barbaric regime. This was a normal, wealthy American family. Julian was an architect, Clara an art consultant. This couldn't be happening. She typed old German symbols into the search bar. This time she saw it. Not the swastika itself, but a very similar, almost identical stylized eagle to the one she'd seen in the photo, often paired with the swastika or other lesser-known symbols of the Third Reich. A Reichsadler, the imperial eagle, the specific design she'd glimpsed on the internet and now replayed in her mind's eye from the trunk, was undeniably linked to Nazi Germany. Her hands trembled as she continued to scroll. The more she looked, the more the cold reality seeped in. The strange formality of Silas, the locked guest room, the hushed conversations, Julian's strained expression, the trunk, the smell of old, decaying paper and metal, it all started to coalesce into something far more sinister than a simple eccentric guest. She had to be wrong. This was insane, but the evidence, flimsy as it was, kept stacking up. She remembered Clara mentioning that Julian's family had some European roots, old money from before the war. A fleeting thought she'd never really paid attention to. Now it felt like a crucial piece of a puzzle she didn't want to solve. For days, Sarah walked a tightrope. She was still the nanny, still cooking, cleaning, caring for the children. But underneath, a frantic current of suspicion and fear pulled at her. She started noticing more. The books in Julian's study, when the door was occasionally left ajar. She caught glimpses of titles in German, old-looking tomes, some with what looked like maps sticking out. She heard hushed conversations, always when she was just out of sight, never a full sentence, just fragments. Old route, Alpine passes, what about the archives? Silas's voice, a low growl, Julian's, a nervous reply. One evening, Julian and Clara had a dinner party. Sarah was responsible for putting the kids to bed, then was free to retreat to her room. But a burning curiosity, now laced with a growing sense of dread, kept her from resting. She heard the faint strains of classical music, the clinking of glasses, polite laughter from downstairs. It was her chance. She knew Julian kept a spare key to Silas's guest room hidden behind a loose brick in the fireplace of the formal living room. She'd seen him retrieve it once days ago when Silas had forgotten something. It was a risk, a massive violation of trust, but the scratching sound from the trunk, the eagle, the hushed words, they haunted her. Her duty as a nanny was to protect the children. What if this business partner was more than just a business partner? What if he was dangerous? What if these secrets put the children at risk? Moving like a phantom, Sarah slipped downstairs, hugging the shadows. The living room was empty, the guests all in the dining room. She moved to the fireplace, her fingers finding the loose brick. With a gentle pull, it came free. Behind it, nestled in the dark recess, was a single, old-fashioned brass key. It felt heavy in her hand, almost buzzing with silent power. She crept upstairs, her heart hammering against her ribs so loudly she was sure it would give her away. The guest room door seemed to loom, a dark portal to an unknown world. She inserted the key. It turned with a soft, satisfying click. The room was dark. She fumbled for the light switch, her hand trembling. The room flooded with a soft, warm light. Her eyes immediately went to the antique trunk. It sat there, unyielding, a sentinel guarding its secrets. She moved towards it, the brass key still in her hand. She remembered Julian locking it, but where was the key for that lock? Then she saw it. A smaller, more intricate key, lying almost casually on the nightstand where the silver box had been. Silas must have left it there. A careless mistake, or a test. She grabbed it, her fingers fumbling with the old-fashioned lock on the trunk. It turned with a resistance that felt almost sentient. The heavy lid creaked open, revealing not ancient documents or stolen jewels, but a meticulously organized interior. Layers of soft, dark velvet covered something. With trembling hands, Sarah lifted the first layer. What lay beneath stole her breath. Not just one map, not just two, but dozens. Rolled tightly, tied with delicate silk ribbons, each one appearing ancient, brittle, and undeniably important. She carefully unrolled the top one. It was a detailed topographical map of what looked like the Austrian Alps, hand-drawn, incredibly precise. And then she saw the symbols, not swastikas, not overtly Nazi, but small, almost imperceptible markings in the corners, subtle deviations from standard cartography. A tiny, almost invisible runic symbol she'd seen on her earlier frantic internet search. A mark of the SS. And beneath that map, carefully folded, was the journal. The same kind of journal she'd seen in her mind's eye during the cold open. Heavy leather-bound, she opened it to a random page, German script, elegant yet chilling. She couldn't read it, but she saw the dates. Dates from the 1940s, dates from the heart of the Third Reich. And then a small, highly detailed sketch. A diagram of a bunker, or an underground facility, with arrows pointing to various exits and entrances and what looked like ventilation shafts. Her breath hitched. This wasn't just a quirky collection. This wasn't about old coins or stamps. This was about history, dark, unspeakable history, the kind of history that people tried to erase or exploit. Mr. Silas wasn't a business partner in the conventional sense. He was a keeper, or a hunter, and what he was hunting or keeping was connected to the Nazis. The maps weren't just maps, they were blueprints to something somewhere, and the journal was the key. Suddenly, a voice, sharp and cold, cut through the silence. Well, Fräulein lost something. Sarah whirled around. Silas stood in the doorway, his hawkish face impassive, his eyes like chips of ice. He wasn't smiling. He held a small, antique pistol loosely in his hand. The hammer was cocked. The glint of brass against the polished steel of the barrel seemed to swallow all the light in the room. Her heart stopped. She was caught. The world contracted. The air grew impossibly thick. Sarah's grip on the ancient map tightened, the brittle paper crinkling under her fingers. Her mind, usually so quick and analytical, screeched to a halt. A gun. A real gun. In the hands of a man who looked at her not with anger, but with an unnervingly cold, calculating assessment. Every movie scene, every news report, every instinct screamed, danger. Lost something. Silas repeated, his voice a low, guttural rumble, accented in a way that now sounded less sophisticated and more sinister. He took a step into the room, then another, closing the distance between them. The antique pistol, held with casual familiarity, never wavered. It was pointed not directly at her, but at the general space she occupied, a silent, deadly suggestion. Sarah forced herself to breathe. In, out, her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drum against the silence. Mr. Silas, she managed, her voice a thin, reedy whisper, betraying none of the steely resolve she desperately tried to project. I heard a noise. I thought something was wrong. The lie felt pathetic, transparent, a faint, almost imperceptible curl of Silas's lip. It wasn't a smile. It was more like a predator examining its prey. A noise, Fräulein, in a locked room. A room you entered with a key you acquired. How, precisely? His gaze flickered to the small, ornate key still clutched in her other hand. Julian is careless with his spare keys, I see. He knew everything. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. Julian had seen her trying to touch the silver box. Julian had put it back in the trunk. He must have known about the trunk, the contents, about Silas. And now Julian was out conveniently. Was this a trap? Was she disposable? The thought was a cold, sharp blade. I didn't mean any harm, Sarah stammered, trying to sound as harmless as possible. I was just curious. These old maps, they're beautiful. I've never seen anything like them. She tried to shift her focus, to direct the conversation away from her transgression and onto the objects themselves, hoping to appeal to whatever passion he might have for them. It was a desperate gamble. Silas took another slow step. He was closer now, close enough for her to smell the faint scent of expensive cologne mixed with something else, something sharp and metallic, like the smell in the room. Curiosity, he murmured, the word laced with a dark amusement. A dangerous trait, Fräulein. Especially when it concerns matters that are private. He gestured with the pistol, a slight tilt of the barrel towards the trunk. "You understand what these are, do you?" Sarah shook her head, trying to project ignorance. "No, sir, just old maps. German, right? My grandfather collected antique maps, so I saw this open and I thought—" "The trunk was not open," Silas interrupted, his voice hardening, cutting through her clumsy explanation like a razor. "You opened it, and you know precisely what you are holding." His eyes fixed on the map in her hand. "The Alpine Redoubt, a rather significant piece of cartography, wouldn't you agree?" Her breath hitched. He wasn't just talking about a general area. He knew the specific map, the detail. He was testing her. He wanted to see if she understood. She had to play dumb, but not too dumb. Too much ignorance might make her a liability. Too much knowledge would make her a threat. "The Alpine Redoubt," Sarah repeated, feigning confusion. "Is that what this is called? I just saw the mountains. And some very old symbols. What do they mean?" She tried to sound genuinely intrigued, like a simpleton admiring ancient hieroglyphs without understanding their context. Silas studied her, his eyes unblinking. She felt like an insect under a microscope. He lowered the gun slightly, but it remained aimed. "They mean a great deal, Fraulein, to those who understand them. They are a legacy, a promise, and a future." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the open trunk. "You are not a historian, I presume, nor a cartographer." "No," Sarah said quickly, "just a nanny. From Kansas originally. I just look after the children." She even tried a small, nervous smile, hoping to project an image of harmlessness, of a simple American girl out of her depth. Silas's gaze sharpened. "A nanny, yes. The children. Julian told me you are very dedicated." The way he said dedicated made it sound like an accusation. "Tell me, Fraulein, what do you imagine Julian and I are discussing in the study?" This was it, the real question, her chance to show she wasn't completely blind but also not a direct threat. "Business," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Julian said you're his business partner. I assumed investments or art deals." She gestured vaguely towards the pristine, expensive decor of the room. A low chuckle escaped Silas. It was a dry, rasping sound devoid of warmth. "Art deals, in a sense, yes. These are works of art, are they not? Priceless, irreplaceable. Each one a masterpiece of its kind." He pointed with the gun barrel not at her, but at the maps in the trunk. "Each one leading to a greater prize." He was beginning to boast, or perhaps to reveal just enough to intimidate, to overwhelm. Sarah seized on it. "A prize?" she asked, her voice tinged with a carefully manufactured wonder. "Like treasure?" Silas's eyes glinted. "Something far greater than gold, Fraulein. Something that could redefine everything. The culmination of a vision, a testament to foresight." He took another step, now standing directly in front of the trunk. "These maps, these journals." He tapped the leather-bound book with the muzzle of his pistol. "They are the keys. Keys to a truth the world was never meant to fully comprehend." He began to explain, his voice taking on a didactic, almost professorial tone, as if lecturing a particularly dull student. But the pistol in his hand was a constant, stark reminder of the gravity of his words. After the war, the world believed everything was lost, scattered, destroyed. But foresight, Fraulein, is a powerful weapon. Resources were diverted. Contingency plans were activated. The most valuable assets, not just gold, not just art, but knowledge, technology, the very spirit of the movement, were carefully secreted away, hidden in places only a select few would ever know. He tapped a specific point on the map in her hand. "This map, for example, it details one of the primary caches, a network of tunnels and facilities deep within the Alpine Massif, designed for survival, designed for a rebirth, a national redoubt in the face of inevitable defeat. What the world called Hitler's last stand was merely a smokescreen. The true last stand, the true survival, was elsewhere." Sarah felt a cold dread creep up her spine. This wasn't just old history. This was a narrative being actively pursued. Silas wasn't just collecting, he was hunting. And what he was hunting was a legacy of Nazism, a legacy he clearly believed in. "And you're looking for these places?" Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. She fought to keep her face neutral to not show the horror churning inside her. Silas gave another of his dry chuckles. I am retrieving what was always meant to be retrieved, reclaiming what is rightfully ours. Julian, he provides the resources, the access. His family has been involved in this great work for generations. They understood the necessity of preserving the truth, the importance of the legacy. Julian's family, her employer, the quiet architect involved for generations, the pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Julian wasn't just an unwitting pawn, he was a scion, a successor, and the comfortable, luxurious life she had seen was built on a foundation of something dark and deeply disturbing. What exactly is in these caches? Sarah asked, forcing the words out. She needed more. She needed to understand the scope of the danger. Silas gestured broadly at the trunk, his eyes gleaming with a fanatic light. Technology far beyond its time, art stolen to finance the future, documents revealing a deeper history, and most importantly, the foundational texts, the true ideological heart. Enough to rekindle the flame, to finish what was started. Finish what was started. The words echoed in her mind, a death knell for any lingering doubt. This was not about historical preservation. This was about revival. And the children? Sarah asked, her voice laced with a sudden, genuine fear that she couldn't hide. What about them? Silas paused, his expression unreadable again. He looked at her, then back at the maps. The children, he said slowly, as if considering them for the first time. They are part of Julian's legacy. They will understand their heritage in time. They will see the vision, or they will be guided. The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air. Guided, or eliminated. Sarah knew then that she was in too deep. This wasn't just her curiosity anymore. This was about the children, about protecting them from a darkness they couldn't possibly comprehend. Silas finally lowered the pistol, tucking it into a hidden holster under his expensive jacket. He reached into the trunk and gently, almost reverently, took the map from her trembling hands. Now, Fraulein, he said, his tone shifting, becoming less menacing, more dismissive. I believe you have laundry to attend to, and I have work to do. Perhaps you might forget what you saw here tonight. For everyone's sake. He turned his back on her, beginning to carefully re-roll the maps, his attention completely absorbed by the contents of the trunk. It was a dismissal. A terrifying, casual dismissal that suggested her life, her knowledge, was deemed insignificant enough that he didn't need to silence her outright. Yet, the confrontation with Silas left Sarah shaken but not broken. The fear was a cold, hard knot in her stomach, but beneath it, a fierce, protective fire had ignited. Silas had underestimated her. He saw a nanny, a curious girl from Kansas. He didn't see a woman who, when pushed, would fight for the innocent. And the children, Julian and Clara's children, were deeply, terrifyingly innocent in this dark conspiracy. She spent the rest of the night in her room, hunched over her laptop, trying to make sense of the fragments Silas had so casually revealed. Alpine redoubt. Generations involved. Rekindle the flame. The words spun in her head, each one a chilling clue. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Alpine redoubt, she typed. The search results were a grim catalog of history, Nazi plans for a final, impregnable fortress in the Alps during the final days of World War II, a place where Hitler and his inner circle would make their last stand, or from which they would orchestrate a post-war resurgence. Historians generally dismissed it as a propaganda myth or an unfeasible fantasy. But Silas spoke of it as a tangible reality. Then she searched for Nazi survival post-WWII. The rabbit hole deepened. Theories of Odessa, the covert organization helping former SS officers escape justice. Tales of hidden gold, stolen art, and scientists spirited away. What Silas was saying, while extreme, resonated with these long-standing, whispered fears of a latent Nazi network. But the most disturbing piece was Julian. His family has been involved in this great work for generations. Julian, the architect, the man who had hired her, who had seemed so normal, so American. How could he be connected to such a horrific legacy? The next day was a blur of forced normalcy. Sarah played with the children, cooked breakfast, helped with homework. But every glance at Julian was now filtered through a lens of suspicion and dread. His polite smiles, his casual questions about her day felt like a performance. Was he complicit? Or was he a pawn, trapped by his family's dark history? She decided to test the waters subtly. At dinner, a rare occasion when Silas joined them, Sarah brought up a documentary she'd seen about World War II, specifically mentioning the myth of the Alpine Redoubt. "Oh, that old chestnut," Julian chuckled, exchanging a quick glance with Silas. "Just another one of those wild theories, Sarah. A product of wartime hysteria, mostly." His tone was dismissive, almost too casual. Silas, however, fixed her with a look that sent a shiver down her spine. "Myths, Fraulein," he said, his voice smooth as silk, "often contain seeds of truth, and some myths are carefully cultivated to keep the curious at bay." His eyes held hers, a silent, chilling warning. Sarah excused herself shortly after, her appetite gone. It was clear. Julian was in on it. Or, at the very least, he was willingly facilitating Silas. The ease with which he dismissed the truth, the glance exchanged with Silas, it spoke volumes. Her employer, the man who trusted her with his children, was involved in a conspiracy linked to the Third Reich. Her protective instincts roared. These children, bright and innocent, were being raised in a house steeped in this darkness. Their future, their very identity, was being shaped by this hidden agenda. She couldn't let it happen. But what could a nanny do against a shadowy network, a wealthy family, and a man with a gun? She needed proof, something undeniable. The maps and the journal, that was the key. But she couldn't just walk into Silas's room again. She had to be smarter, more strategic. Over the next few days, Sarah became a ghost herself. She observed, she listened. Every casual comment from Julian or Clara, every interaction with Silas was catalogued, analyzed. One afternoon, while Julian was on a business call in his study, the door left slightly ajar. Sarah was passing by with a load of clean towels. She heard Silas's voice, sharper than usual. "The Austrian archives. They are proving recalcitrant. The specific coordinates for the secondary entrance to Sector Gamma are still eluding us." Julian's voice, hushed and strained, replied, "My family connections are trying, but after the recent incident with the Innsbruck documents, they've tightened security considerably." Innsbruck documents, Sector Gamma, Austrian archives, more pieces. Sarah silently retrieved her phone, her heart pounding, and began recording. She couldn't understand much, but she knew the sounds, the voices, would be crucial. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, Sarah ventured into Julian's study. He was out with Clara again. This time, she wasn't just looking for clues. She was looking for evidence of his complicity. The study was normally a shrine to modern architecture and design. But now she saw it through Silas's words, a place where resources were provided. On a large, antique globe in the corner, she noticed a series of small, almost invisible pinpricks. She leaned closer. Each pinprick was surrounded by a tiny, faded pencil circle, all clustered in the Austrian Alps, the same region as the map Silas called the Alpine Redoubt. Then she found it, tucked away in a locked drawer of Julian's otherwise meticulously organized desk. Not a diary, but a small, leather-bound ledger. It wasn't in German, but English, and the entries sent a cold shiver down her spine. 1972, Contribution to Heritage Preservation Society, Zug, Switzerland. 1985, Donation to European Historical Research Foundation, Liechtenstein. 1998, Grant for Alpine Archaeological Survey, Bavaria. 2010, Investment in Pan-European Cultural Exchange Program, Vienna. All seemingly innocuous philanthropic endeavors, but beneath each entry, Julian had made a small, almost imperceptible note in fine script. Codes. She recognized the runic symbols she had seen on her frantic internet search, subtle marks of the SS. And then next to the 2010 entry, she saw something else. Silas' contact confirmed. Access to G archives secured. Julian wasn't just connected. He was an active participant. funding, facilitating, maintaining a network of organizations that, under the guise of cultural preservation, were clearly fronts for something far more sinister. They were the generations Silas had spoken of. Julian's family had been keeping this flame alive, passing the torch of this dark legacy from one generation to the next. And the children. Her mind raced back to Silas's chilling words. They will understand their heritage in time. They will see the vision, or they will be guided. It wasn't just about Julian providing resources. It was about perpetuating the ideology. The children were being groomed. Indoctrinated, they were the future of this terrifying vision. Sarah's hands trembled as she replaced the ledger. The luxurious brownstone, once a symbol of success and stability, now felt like a gilded cage, trapping her and the children in a web of historical evil. She wasn't just an observer anymore. She was an unwilling participant, and if she didn't act, if she didn't expose this, these children would be lost. Their innocence, their future, would be swallowed by the long shadow of the Third Reich. The ledger was the smoking gun. It confirmed everything. Julian Harrington wasn't merely a victim of circumstance or a reluctant facilitator. He was a keeper of the flame, a financier of a monstrous historical revisionism. And his children, the two innocent souls Sarah was sworn to protect, were next in line for this dark inheritance. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, stripping away any last vestiges of fear and replacing it with a cold, clear resolve. She wasn't just a nanny anymore. She was a guardian, a reluctant warrior against a ghost that refused to die. The immediate problem: she couldn't go to the police. Not yet. Her story, without ironclad proof, would sound like the delusion of an overstressed employee. My employers are Nazis, and their business partner has a gun and secret maps. They'd laugh her out of the station. Or worse, Silas would get wind of it, and her carefully planned escape route for the children, if she could even formulate one, would be slammed shut. She needed incontrovertible evidence, and she needed to understand what Silas was truly looking for, what this greater prize was. The maps, the journal, they held the answers. Her strategy shifted. During the day, she maintained her facade of cheerful domesticity, but every spare moment, every late night, was dedicated to a meticulous, clandestine investigation. She became an amateur spy in her own workplace. She remembered the recordings on her phone. Fragmented, yes, but valuable. The mention of Austrian archives, Innsbruck documents, Sector Gamma. These weren't random words. They were specific targets. She began cross-referencing them online, searching for any publicly available information about these archives, any unusual incidents. Then there was the journal. Silas had left it in the trunk, now relocked, but he had been careless with the smaller key once. She knew he wouldn't make that mistake again, but she had seen the journal, touched it. She remembered the dates, the diagrams of the bunker. One evening, Julian left his study door slightly ajar again. A risky move, but a necessary opportunity. Sarah knew his schedule, his habits. He would be gone for at least an hour. She slipped in, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She wasn't looking for the ledger again. She was looking for anything Silas might have left behind, anything Julian might have been studying related to the trunk's contents. On Julian's large drafting table, beneath a pile of architectural blueprints, she found it. A single, high-quality photographic print. It was a page from the journal, a diagram, not the one she'd seen before, but an even more detailed schematic. It showed multiple levels, reinforced walls, ventilation systems, and a series of numbered chambers. And in the corner, a tiny, almost microscopic signature, Dr. K. Schmidt. Dr. K. Schmidt. She quickly snapped a photo with her phone. This was a name, a lead. Back in her room, using the limited Wi-Fi, she plugged the name into her search engine. The results were immediate and chilling. Dr. Carl Schmidt, a brilliant but fanatical Third Reich scientist, vanished at the end of the war, rumored to be involved in advanced weapons development, rocketry, and theoretical physics. Specifically, the development of a revolutionary energy source. A source that could power cities or, in the wrong hands, catastrophic weapons. The greater prize, it wasn't just gold or art. It was a forgotten technology, A scientific secret that could rewrite the balance of power, a weapon, or a power source. Something that could, indeed, rekindle the flame. This escalated everything. This wasn't just about reclaiming a historical legacy. It was about activating a technological one. Now she understood the urgency. Silas wasn't just researching, he was actively seeking. He needed those specific coordinates for Sector Gamma, the secondary entrance. He was assembling the pieces, and he was close. Sarah realized she couldn't do this alone. She needed an ally, someone who would believe her. Someone with the resources and knowledge to understand the gravity of what she had uncovered. But who? She thought about her friend, Emily, a history buff who worked at a university library. Emily would understand the historical context, but would she believe the Nazi employer part? And would she be safe? Sarah couldn't risk putting Emily in direct danger. Then she remembered an online forum she'd stumbled upon during her initial panicked research. A niche community of independent historians and conspiracy theorists dedicated to debunking or verifying post-WWII Nazi survival theories. It was an anonymous space, a place where she could share information without revealing her identity or putting anyone she knew in harm's way immediately. She meticulously compiled her evidence. The photo of Dr. Schmidt's diagram, the ledger entries carefully cropped to show only the coded notes, not Julian's name, for now, the audio snippets of Silas and Julian. She wrote a careful anonymized post, presenting it as a theoretical what-if scenario, asking for help in interpreting the symbols, the names, the historical context. She stressed the urgency. The responses were a mix of skepticism and genuine interest. But one user with the handle Veritas Eterna stood out. Their reply was concise, authoritative, and alarmingly specific. The Schmidt diagrams. These are exceptionally rare. If legitimate, this points to Project Valkyrie's Eternal Sun initiative. The Sector Gamma you refer to is likely located within the Salzburg Fortress Zone, known historically as the Festung Hohensalzburg Perimeter. The Innsbruck documents likely refer to hidden cartographic records. This is not a drill. Contact me directly, securely. You are in possession of information that could change historical understanding, or worse, reignite a dangerous ideology. The message ended with a link to an encrypted communication platform. Sarah hesitated for only a second. Veritas Eterna knew too much to be a random internet troll. They understood the stakes. This was her chance. She opened the encrypted link. Just as she was about to type her first message, a sudden, loud clang echoed from downstairs. The house, usually so quiet, now felt alive with a tense energy. Footsteps, heavy and hurried, moved through the living room. Then Julian's voice, raised in an agitated whisper. He found it. He found the access codes. He's leaving tonight. Sarah froze, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Leaving tonight. Silas was making his move. He had found what he needed. The greater prize was within his grasp. She scrambled to close her laptop, her mind racing. This was it, the culmination, the very moment she had been dreading. If Silas left with whatever he had, with whatever secrets he was about to unlock, it might be too late. The children, her promise, her duty. She needed to act now. Not with careful planning, not with anonymous messages, but with a desperate, immediate intervention. She had to expose him. She had to stop him. And she had to protect the children. She had an idea, a risky, insane idea that relied on every piece of evidence she had gathered and on a bold, public confrontation. It was the only way to make enough noise, to draw enough attention that Silas and Julian wouldn't be able to simply disappear into the shadows. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. He's leaving tonight. The last piece of the puzzle slotted into place. Silas had everything he needed. The codes, the maps, the research. He was about to make his move. And if he slipped away, taking his secrets with him, the chance to stop Project Valkyrie's Eternal Sun and expose Julian's generational complicity would be lost forever. The horrifying truth would remain buried, only to resurface in a future unimaginable. There was no time for careful planning, no time for anonymous forum replies or encrypted messages. This called for something drastic, something loud, something public. Her mind raced, sifting through every piece of information, every detail of the Harringtons' lives. Clara, the art consultant, Julian's wife. Tonight, Clara was hosting a high-profile charity art gala and auction at the city's most prestigious cultural center. It was her moment in the spotlight, a chance to debut a significant new acquisition and announce a major philanthropic initiative. The cream of society, media, even a few politicians would be there. It was the perfect stage. The insane idea solidified. She wouldn't just expose Silas and Julian, she would do it in front of everyone. First, the children. They were the most vulnerable. She couldn't risk them being caught in the crossfire. She quickly called a trusted friend, another nanny who lived nearby, fabricating an urgent family emergency that required her to leave the kids for a few hours. "Just until I get back," she pleaded, her voice carefully pitched to sound distraught, not panicked. The friend, sympathetic, agreed without question. As the Harringtons' driver whisked the children away to the friend's apartment, Sarah felt a pang of guilt for the deception, but a surge of relief that they were safe, at least for now. Next, the evidence. She had the photo of Dr. Schmidt's diagram on her phone, the picture of Julian's ledger. She had the audio recording of Silas and Julian's hushed conversation. But these were fragments. The core, the undeniable proof, lay in the trunk, the maps, the journal, Silas's guest room. She crept back up the stairs, moving like a shadow. Julian and Clara were already gone, undoubtedly at the gala. Silas's presence downstairs was a new, dangerous variable. He was preparing to leave. That meant he might be distracted, or he might be more vigilant than ever. As she passed Julian's study, she heard a muffled thump. He must have been putting something away, clearing his tracks. She needed to be quick. The guest room door was shut. She tried the handle, locked as expected, but she remembered where Julian hid the spare key in the living room fireplace. She also remembered Silas's carelessness with the small, intricate key to the trunk. Would he make the same mistake in his haste? She crept downstairs, bypassing the study, her heart hammering, the living room fireplace. She found the loose brick, retrieved the spare key. Back upstairs, her hand trembled as she inserted the key into the guest room lock. It turned with a soft click. The room was in disarray. Silas had clearly been packing. Clothes lay half-folded on the bed. A duffel bag sat open on the floor. And the antique trunk was open, several of the maps already gone. But many remained, spread across the velvet lining, some rolled, some still folded within the journal. And there, lying casually on the nightstand, almost as if left deliberately, was the small, intricate brass key for the trunk. He had been careless in his haste, or perhaps in his arrogance. Sarah grabbed the remaining maps, the journal, and the key. She stuffed them into a large canvas tote bag she'd brought specifically for this purpose, a bag she usually used for groceries. The mundane object felt profoundly out of place, laden now with the weight of history. As she turned to leave, her gaze fell upon the small, ornate silver box she had first tried to touch. It lay open on the nightstand, its secrets now exposed. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded silk, was a single, tarnished iron cross, and beneath it a small, meticulously folded piece of parchment. She hesitated, then snatched it, stuffing it into her bag. Every piece of evidence mattered. She quickly locked the guest room door behind her, leaving the spare key on the nightstand in her own room, a small, futile attempt to distance herself from the break-in, though she knew it wouldn't matter once the truth exploded. Now for the execution. The gala was already underway. She had no invitation, no formal dress. She was just the nanny, but she had a plan. She hailed a cab, gripping the tote bag containing the maps and journal like a lifeline. The cultural center glowed, a beacon of refined elegance. Limousines lined the streets. Paparazzi flashed their cameras. Security guards, impeccably dressed, stood by the entrance. Her heart pounded. She couldn't walk in through the front door. She remembered Clara once mentioning a staff entrance, a loading dock at the rear for art deliveries and event setup. It was a long shot, but her only shot. She found it, dimly lit and bustling with harried event staff. She blended in, looking like just another overworked crew member. She reached the main exhibition hall, a grand space filled with glittering chandeliers, hushed conversations, and the faint clinking of champagne flutes. On a raised stage at the front, a large, pristine white screen dominated the backdrop, ready for Clara's presentation. Julian and Clara stood at the edge of the stage, smiling, greeting dignitaries. Silas, distinguished and aloof, was by their side, constantly checking his watch, his eyes scanning the exits, clearly preparing for his imminent departure. His hawkish gaze swept the room, but he didn't see her. She was just another face in the crowd, blending into the periphery. Clara took the stage, her voice smooth and practiced, introducing the newly acquired painting, an exquisite abstract piece by a celebrated contemporary artist. The lights dimmed, focusing on Clara and the screen behind her, which now displayed a stunning digital image of the artwork. This was her moment. Sarah moved. She scanned the room, looking for a control panel, a projector access point. She spotted a small, unobtrusive booth at the back, where a technician was managing the visuals and sound. She approached the technician, her voice a rapid, urgent whisper. "Emergency. Clara needs these visuals up immediately." It's a last-minute addition for the philanthropic initiative segment. She wants them integrated into her speech, a surprise reveal. She pointed to her phone, showing the image of Dr. Schmidt's diagram, the ledger. It's for the hidden history part of her speech. The technician, already overwhelmed, took one look at her phone, then at the elegant woman on stage and shrugged. "All right, just connected here," he said, gesturing to a port. He seemed too busy to question her. Sarah connected her phone, adrenaline surging through her. Her fingers flew, selecting the images, preparing the audio file. She timed it perfectly. Clara was mid-sentence, describing the profound historical significance of the newly acquired art piece, tying it into the enduring legacy of human creativity. And it is with this spirit of innovation and perseverance that we look to the future, mindful of the rich tapestry of our past, ensuring that true genius is always unearthed and celebrated. As she spoke the word unearthed, Sarah pressed play. The elegant image of the abstract painting on the huge screen vanished, replaced instantly by the stark, complex diagram of Dr. Carl Schmidt's underground bunker facility. The room, which had been buzzing with polite murmurs, fell into an astonished silence. A gasp rippled through the audience. Clara, mid-gesture, froze. Her smile faltered, replaced by a look of utter bewilderment. Julian's head snapped up, his eyes widening in horror as he recognized the image. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the soft whir of the projector and the nervous coughs of a few audience members. Clara, recovering her composure slightly, turned to the technician, her voice strained. "What is the meaning of this? There's been a mistake." But before the technician could respond, Sarah's voice, amplified and resonant, filled the hall. She had quickly grabbed a microphone from the booth, bypassing the technician's startled protests. "No mistake, Mrs. Harrington. This isn't part of your speech, but it is about unearthing genius and about the rich tapestry of our past." She stepped out of the booth, walking purposefully towards the stage, the canvas tote bag clutched in her hand. Her eyes met Silas's across the room. His hand instinctively went to his jacket towards where his pistol had been, but he was surrounded, trapped. His cover was blown. "My name is Sarah Miller," she announced, her voice trembling slightly but firm. "I am or was the nanny for the Harrington family." She gestured towards Julian, who looked as though he might faint. "And tonight I have a story to tell you. A story about a secret that Julian Harrington and his business partner, Mr. Silas, have been trying to keep buried." A ripple of murmuring swept through the audience. Faces turned from the screen to Sarah, then to Julian and Silas, confusion warring with a dawning understanding. Sarah clicked her phone, and the image on the screen changed. Now it displayed the photograph of Julian's ledger, specifically the coded entries, the names of the seemingly innocuous foundations, and the telltale runic symbols. "Julian Harrington, the renowned architect," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "has been funding a network of organizations for decades. Organizations that, under the guise of heritage preservation and cultural exchange, have been perpetuating a far darker legacy. She clicked again. The audio recording, muffled but discernible, played for the stunned audience. Silas's voice, distinct and accented. The Austrian archives, they are proving recalcitrant. The specific coordinates for the secondary entrance to Sector Gamma are still eluding us. Then Julian's hushed reply, "My family connections are trying." But after the recent incident with the Innsbruck documents, they've tightened security considerably. Gasps erupted from the audience. Sector Gamma, Innsbruck documents. The words hung heavy, ominous. "This isn't about art," Sarah declared, walking closer to the stage, her gaze sweeping over the horrified faces. "This is about the Third Reich. It's about a man named Dr. Carl Schmidt, a Nazi scientist involved in advanced weapons research. And it's about a secret project called Eternal Sun, aimed at developing a revolutionary energy source. A source that could either power a new world or destroy it." She reached the edge of the stage, looking directly at Julian. "Mr. Harrington, your family hasn't just been preserving history. You've been protecting a legacy of Nazism, preparing for its resurgence. Your business partner, Mr. Silas, isn't here for investments. He's here to retrieve what you've been protecting. He's here for the maps." With a dramatic flourish, Sarah opened her canvas tote bag. From it, she pulled out the ancient, brittle, hand-drawn maps, unrolling them for the audience to see. She held up the map of the Alpine Redoubt, the precise topographical details, the almost imperceptible runic symbols in the corners. The sheer antiquity and chilling specificity of them were undeniable. "These aren't just old maps," she explained, her voice carrying an authoritative weight she hadn't known she possessed. "These are blueprints. Blueprints to hidden caches, to underground facilities deep within the Austrian Alps. Facilities designed for survival, for a rebirth of a heinous ideology. These are the maps of the Nazi map thief." Hall erupted in a clamor. Whispers became shouts. People stood, pointing, their faces a mixture of shock and disgust. Journalists, recognizing the bombshell, began frantically taking photos and videos. Julian, his face ashen, finally found his voice. "Sarah, what are you doing? This is insane. She's delusional." He tried to rush her, but a security guard, sensing the extreme tension, subtly blocked his path. Silas, meanwhile, had been slowly, deliberately making his way towards an emergency exit. His eyes were fixed on Sarah, a cold fury simmering beneath his controlled exterior. He saw his carefully laid plans unraveling before his eyes. "And this," Sarah continued, pulling out the leather-bound journal, holding it aloft. "This is the journal of Dr. K. Schmidt himself. The key to understanding these maps, to unlocking the Eternal Sun project. Silas is here to activate it, to rekindle the flame, as he put it." She paused, then pulled out the final piece of evidence from her bag, the small, folded parchment she'd found in the silver box. She carefully unfolded it. It was a formal document, beautifully calligraphed, but its content was sickening. "And this, Mr. Silas, is yours, a commission, an appointment, dated 1944, promising you a vital role in the Reich's enduring future, signed by none other than Heinrich Himmler himself. Your real name, sir, is not Silas. It's Siegfried Kessel, a highly decorated SS officer, believed to have vanished at the end of the war, tasked with securing the Alpine Redoubt caches." The name Siegfried Kessel echoed through the hall, a ghost from history made terrifyingly real. Silas froze, his composure shattered. The last vestige of his carefully constructed identity crumbled. His eyes, now burning with pure hatred, locked onto Sarah. He knew he was exposed irrevocably. He had to silence her. Now, with a sudden, violent movement, he shoved a man in his path and lunged towards Sarah. His hand flew to his jacket, not for the pistol he'd left behind, but for a small, sharp letter opener he'd concealed. His intention was clear: to silence the nanny who had dared to expose him. But the audience, shocked into action, reacted. A collective scream tore through the hall. Several guests, galvanized by the sheer audacity of the attack, surged forward, attempting to block Silas. Amidst the chaos, a brave security guard, seeing Silas's murderous intent, tackled him mid-lunge. The two crashed to the floor, the letter opener clattering away. Other security personnel rushed in, restraining the struggling former SS officer. Julian, still reeling, looked at Clara, who stared at him with an expression of utter betrayal and disgust. The sheer weight of his family's century-long secret, now brutally exposed by his own nanny, crushed him. He collapsed onto a chair, burying his face in his hands, defeated. The lights came up fully, illuminating the scene of pandemonium. Police sirens wailed in the distance, already converging on the cultural center. The Nazi map thief had been caught, not by a secret agent or a historian, but by an American nanny, armed only with her wits and a terrifying truth. The fallout was immediate and global. The Nanny exposes Nazi plot story exploded across every news outlet, dominating headlines for weeks. The footage from the gala, showing Sarah's courageous confrontation and Silas's violent lunge, went viral, becoming an indelible image of history refusing to stay buried. Siegfried Kessel, a man presumed dead for decades, was positively identified through meticulous forensic analysis and historical records. His capture confirmed the terrifying reality of a high-ranking SS officer, not only surviving the war, but actively working to resurrect its most dangerous ideological and technological ambitions. His antique pistol, found during the subsequent search of the Harrington home, turned out to be a rare ceremonial SS firearm, further cementing his identity and his unwavering commitment to the Nazi cause. Julian Harrington, stripped of his carefully constructed life, faced charges of conspiracy, financial fraud related to his shell foundations, and obstruction of justice. His family's long-standing connection to Kessel and the Eternal Son project became a damning indictment, revealing a generational commitment to extremist ideology hidden beneath a veneer of philanthropy and success. Clara Harrington, initially appearing to be an unwitting victim, faced intense scrutiny. While no direct evidence of her complicity in the Eternal Son project emerged, her willful ignorance and benefit from Julian's illicit wealth left her reputation in tatters. She later filed for divorce, taking the children and seeking to rebuild a life far from the shadows of their father's monstrous secret. The maps in Dr. Schmidt's journal became invaluable historical artifacts. Experts confirmed the authenticity of the Alpine Redoubt documents and the detailed schematics for the Eternal Son project. The concept, which involved harnessing a then-unknown form of energy, was chillingly prescient and, if realized, could have indeed provided the Third Reich with an unstoppable advantage. The documents suggested that Kessel's specific mission was to retrieve the last remaining components and research notes, hidden in Sector Gamma, a heavily fortified and camouflaged facility deep within the Salzburg region of the Austrian Alps. The Innsbruck documents, mentioned in Julian and Silas's recording, were believed to be crucial access codes and operational details for this specific site. The revelation sparked renewed investigations into other supposed Nazi survival networks and hidden caches across Europe and South America. It forced a reevaluation of historical narratives, demonstrating that while the Third Reich fell, its most fervent adherents and dangerous ambitions did not simply vanish with the war's end. And Sarah Miller, the American nanny from Kansas, became an unlikely hero. She refused the offers for lucrative book deals and reality TV shows. Her focus remained on the children. After the dust settled, she ensured they were placed in a secure, loving environment, far away from their father's toxic legacy. She testified against Kessel and Harrington, her calm, precise account of their plot providing crucial evidence. Sarah's story is a stark reminder. The quiet hum of our daily lives can indeed hide secrets so vast, so dark, they could rewrite history. It's a testament to the fact that evil, even when defeated on the battlefield, can mutate, adapt, and patiently wait in the shadows for its moment to return. Kessel, Julian, the Eternal Son project, these weren't just relics of the past. They were a chilling blueprint for a future that almost came to be, stopped only by the courage and vigilance of an ordinary person in extraordinary circumstances. The Nazi map thief wasn't just chasing old maps. He was chasing a future for a vile ideology. He was seeking to finish what was started, as he told Sarah. His capture and the subsequent exposure of the Eternal Sun Project served as a potent warning that the fight against extremism and the protection of historical truth are not battles won once and for all. They are ongoing acts of vigilance, requiring ordinary people to step up and challenge the comfortable narratives that allow darkness to fester in plain sight. The children, now safe, represent the hope that future generations can learn from the past, rather than be condemned to repeat it. Their protection, the true triumph of Sarah's courage, underscores why this topic matters right now. Because the ghost of history isn't just in dusty old books, it can be lurking right next door, waiting for its chance to strike. Sarah's discovery of the Eternal Sun Project revealed how sophisticated and far-reaching the Third Reich's plans truly were, extending far beyond the battlefield. But Kessel's was not the only hidden initiative designed to grant the Nazis unparalleled power. There were whispers of other projects, advanced aerospace designs, mind control experiments, and even attempts to harness arcane forces. If you want to dive deeper into the terrifying truth behind these, then click here to watch our next deep dive.